I just witnessed my world collapsing in slow motion. The love of my life, Lori, shattered my heart with her deceit. "It's just sex, honey," she said, but her eyes told a different story. The trail runs deep, and I decided to turn the tables. Using her own credit card, I orchestrated a public spectacle. I served her divorce papers at the airport, filming every second of her meltdown. The sight of her crumbling was my twisted revenge. This is my story. Enjoy watching it. The best part about getting divorced was seeing Lori's shocked face when she got the divorce papers at the airport. I went all out and hired 2 people, one to give her the papers and another to record it. I paid with Lori's credit card. She had given me a card from her account when she got a new job, the job that ended our marriage. She forgot to cancel my card when she moved out. Lori was careless with money and had so many credit cards she likely forgot this one. The card had a great cash advance feature. Lori never destroyed the convenience checks that came with it. Since she had a high credit limit, I took out $15,000 and put it in the joint account I had with my sister. I signed my own name on the checks, and no one questioned it. Lori could have tried to get it back, but it was part of what my lawyer called the marital estate. She might have gone to the police, but she never did. She earned more than me anyway. Funny enough, this memory came to me when I saw her 5 years later. To be clear, I used the cash advance for one thing and her regular credit card for another. With the regular card, I decided to live in style since my wife turned out to be unfaithful. I bought new clothes, luggage, and had nice dinners. I also got tested for diseases just to be safe. I didn't spend any of my own money during the 2 weeks before I left. Lucky for me, the divorce lawyer accepted credit cards, so I paid him with Lori's card, including the fees for serving the papers. The fraud center called a few times, but I told them the charges were okay. I knew all of Lori's security answers, and I could imitate her voice well enough. Maybe she could have gone after me for that too, but no one did. Now here she was, walking up to my patio table like she owned the place. Her blonde hair blew in the breeze, and she swayed as she walked. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a t-shirt, but she still turned heads. It was always like this, even back in the day. I had a feeling this might happen. I saw one of her friends at a store yesterday. Lori knew I liked this cafe. It was a logical place to find me if she wanted to. "Hello, dear husband," she said. "Lori," I said, nodding. "Have you gained weight?" She looked stunned. She had gained a bit, but wore it well. I knew asking that was mean. I was being cruel on purpose, making it clear that I didn't want her to have any false hopes. "You don't have to be a jerk, Steve. That's not something a husband says to his wife." She called me husband again. That was a new angle. Looking back, it made more sense why she reacted the way she did at the airport. My lawyer had warned me, and I should have listened. I thought she couldn't be that clueless. I was wrong. Life is surprising. I remembered her face at the airport when she got the divorce papers. That look was priceless. First, she was furious. Then she started crying, and finally she collapsed on the floor. Call me cruel, but that moment was the start of getting my confidence back. I watched that video 20 times, laughing until I felt sad. Then I drank bourbon until I passed out. The next day I woke up with a terrible headache. At the airport, people filmed Lori's breakdown, intrigued by the drama. Once they recognized her, more people started recording. The videos went up on social media in minutes. I never should have paid the second guy to film it. "Look at you having fun on your European trip, girl." I had thought. "Husband?" I asked her, staring into her bright blue eyes. People around us tried to act like they weren't listening. "Husband?" She nodded. I just stared at her. She crossed her arms. "I told you I would never let you divorce me. That's why I tore up every paper they tried to give me." She pushed her chin out. I could tell she was tapping her foot. She always did that when she was nervous. I didn't have anything to say. She was stuck in her own world. You see, the backup server's video showed everything. The Lori got up off the floor with help from some baggage handlers who kept accidentally touching her. She ripped the envelope with the divorce papers and threw them in a trash can. She did the same thing to every paper my lawyer served her. The discovery demands, the notice for her to give a statement, the notices for the statements from the witnesses, the hearing notice, and the final divorce order. As far as I knew, she never hired a lawyer. She never came to court. She never replied to anything we filed. She would just tell the process servers the same thing every time. I will never agree to a divorce. The same two guys kept delivering the papers after that. They liked the drama, even though she never had another big breakdown. She never tried to hide. It was easy to find her. She thought that if she didn't agree, the divorce wouldn't happen. My lawyer thought the same thing about what was going on in her head. When she got the first papers, I paid my lawyer more money using her credit card. I thought she was planning something big to stop us at the last minute, but she wasn't. I also thought she might at least fight the credit card charges. But no, she didn't do that either. My sister was right. I hope that girl is really special little brother. My sister told me after a few, probably 5 beers when I told her I was getting married. Because I really do believe, she said with big emphasis, that she is dumber than a sack of hammers. That offended me back then. Sure, I knew Lori wasn't the smartest, but she had a big heart and she had opened it to me. We were each other's first loves. We were freshmen in college. We were both young and made a mistake. After a missed period in a few weeks, a home test and a doctor's visit told us the news. I stepped up and took responsibility by proposing. Both our families were shocked. First, that I got her pregnant. Second, that she let me. Third, that we wanted to get married during our first year of college. Like then, I defended her when everyone criticized her. It made our love stronger. I was her hero. Neither of us really wanted the baby, but we wanted the miscarriage even less. About 10 to 20% of pregnancies end this way, but it's likely higher because some happened very early. Lori lost the baby after we had married in a simple ceremony over winter break of our freshman year. Lesson learned. Sometimes it's better to wait and see if problems solve themselves. Everything married early changed college life for us. We got an apartment, went to classes, and didn't date others. We still saw friends, but they weren't sure how to treat us as a married couple. So we spent a lot of time together. First, we prepared for the baby, then we dealt with the miscarriage. After that, we were all over each other because, well, we were married. Lori was on birth control, as we didn't have to hide anything anymore. There were challenges, of course. Lori left school after our second year. She was sad about it. I tried to comfort her, thinking it was about the miscarriage, but now I think she just realized she didn't care about studying. She found her way and started working various sales jobs. She did well. Men liked buying from a beautiful young woman who smiled a lot. Me, I took more classes to finish sooner. During summers, I worked an office job that turned into a full-time job after I graduated early working for a consulting company. Anything was, Lori didn't think of herself as pretty. In high school, she was fat, had acne, glasses, and braces, and was short. Just before college, she grew taller, lost weight, her skin cleared, braces came off, and she got contact lenses. Lori still saw herself as fat and ugly. She spent her first months at college hiding from others. I met her at a party. She was trying to talk to a guy when his drunk girlfriend shoved her, calling Lori fat and gross. She knew this girl from high school, and they weren't friends. Lori was crying when I found her sitting on the stairs. She believed what the girl had said, even though it wasn't true. I helped her calm down, took her for coffee, and listened to her story about feeling unattractive. She noticed I had stopped listening and was just looking into her eyes. She got shy, crossed her arms, and asked what was wrong. Normally, I wouldn't be so forward. I wasn't great with girls and had no long-term girlfriends. I told her she was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She looked at me, waiting for a joke. When she realized I meant it, she started crying again. We went outside, found a bench, and I hugged her. The hug turned into a kiss. After that, she stayed with me most of the time until later. Years passed, and Lori sat down at my table uninvited. The waiter quickly came over. Lori ordered a Cosmo, maybe from watching too much Sex in the City. "The checks," I told the waiter. The waiter looked at me like I was crazy, but went to get her drink. Lori pouted. "You don't want to buy a girl a drink? A girl I like." "Sure," I said. The waiter brought Lori's drink quickly. Lori had that effect on people, just not on me anymore. "I've forgiven you," she said, looking into my eyes. I waited, but she said nothing more. "That's good," I said. "Keeping anger inside is bad for your health. Studies show that." "I know," she said. I couldn't resist asking, "What have you forgiven me for?" She seemed to take in aback, like she expected a different conversation. "For leaving me in our marriage, for what you posted on social media, for trying to divorce me, for what you did with the house. But like I said, I've forgiven you." I'm ready for us to get back together and grow old like we planned. She smiled, waiting for me to accept her offer. I smiled back, seeing hope in her eyes. Nah, thanks, but I'll pass. Her hope disappeared like a blown-out candle. She almost started crying. Don't bother, I said. Tears won't work. She stopped herself. Her eyes shifted around. I knew what that meant. So what story are you going to tell? I asked. She slumped in her chair. I hoped she might be direct like when we first met nearly 10 years ago. You never gave me a chance to explain, she said. Here we go, I thought. I might need some alcohol to get through this. Here, I wanted to enjoy my wine. I wasn't a wine expert, but I liked good wines. I started drinking them after our split. This place used to just serve coffee, but had upgraded. Now they had wine, too. Things were different now. I had hoped to enjoy my drink after my espresso, but I felt I needed to drink the wine quickly just to get through the next 15 minutes. I didn't want her to affect me. I decided I needed help. I picked up my phone and typed a text. Need backup? Trouble here. I got to reply quickly. I'm driving. I'll see your message when I get there. Fine. Looked like I'd have to handle this alone. I glared at Lori and took a big gulp of my wine. Bullshit, I said. She jumped in her chair and then sat back. I used to never raise my voice to her, but it was time. We need a trial separation. Can't you see our marriage has problems? I mimicked her voice, adding a bit of drama and craziness, just a bit more than how she had looked at the time. Some people at other tables started chuckling. They knew her voice. Most people in town did. I just need some time alone to find myself. I'm losing my identity. I don't know who I am anymore. I continued to mimic her, my voice high and screechy, turning the drama up to the max. We were just kids when we got married. Heck, I'm still a kid. How can I think about having children when I'm still a child myself? I went on, waving my arms around, then stretching them out as if Lori was nailed to a cross of motherhood. Then came the real shocker. I'm suffering from fear of missing out, I cried out. Then the best part was when Lori said, I want to suck the marrow out of life, dear husband, quoting from that movie you like, Dead Poets Society, though they took it from Thoreau. But what she really meant was, I want to hook up with the sports guy who works before me and his wife, I shouted. Lori looked at me stunned. The people at the other tables were pretending they weren't listening, but I knew they were. This whole messy story was big news when it happened, mostly because of me. They all knew it, but probably hadn't thought about it in ages. Now it was all coming back. Truth is, she never said that last part. Well, not most of it. She did talk about her fear of missing out and wanting to live life fully, which nearly made me laugh for being so serious. And I found out about the sports guy and his wife later. It stopped me from laughing, then was what she said next, right after a short pause. If you love me, you'll let me do this. I didn't think about my next words. They just came out wild and angry. Well, I guess I don't love you then, I said as I stormed upstairs, grabbing her clothes from the drawers and throwing them over the railing into the living room. That made her start crying. But I was already downstairs, stuffing her clothes into trash bags. She stopped picking up her clothes and just watched me. I think she imagined I would be the one leaving. I did eventually, but on my own terms, not hers. I was so mad I went for a 10-mile run to blow off steam. We had been stuck for a while. Things got stale months before her new job. I was busy with my work, and Lori had just quit one of her sales jobs because her boss got too touchy. She was moping around, unsure what to do next. A friend invited her to a beach trip in Florida. She was driving me crazy, so I told her to go. The trip wasn't fun. The weather was awful, thanks to a near-miss hurricane. One day, when it was finally sunny, Lori was on the beach in a somewhat conservative bikini. A local news team interviewed her about a water spout off the coast. She hadn't seen it, but was rocking her bikini, so they talked to her anyway. Lori did a funny fake weather report about how the weather had been bad, and how everyone would probably go to bed early. She was goofy, but she did it as if she were a real weather reporter. People loved it. Soon there was a big demand to hire the sexy weather girl. She got a job by the end of the month. Some folks online grumbled about it, but they got around that by calling her a weather reporter and having her dress modestly on air. Her looks did the rest. When she got the job, Lori was super excited. She was jumping up and down, and I was happy for her too. At first it was great. She paid off my student loans and rented a nice house. Things picked up in the bedroom too after a slow period, but then things changed. She started spending more time at work. She gained fans and posted lots of selfies on Twitter. She began thinking of herself as not just beautiful, but stunning. She was so I didn't mind. But her attitude changed. That was a problem. She got snappy and talked down to me, especially when her work friends were around. At work events, she would flirt openly. She didn't care if I didn't like it. She often wore simple dresses on air, but I noticed that she, mainly by herself, appeared in public wearing more revealing clothes. Our intimacy, which had dipped when she was feeling down, briefly improved, but then worsened again, dropping even further. We stopped spending any alone time together, not even sharing simple physical closeness. I knew where this was heading, but she shut me down when I tried to talk. She said I was just jealous of her success, and she finally said she wanted to separate. It wasn't a shock. I thought she was already seeing someone else and had been for months. Because of that, I was really mad when she told me. I never cheated with Deshawn while we were together. She said when we met at the cafe. I was surprised. What did she mean by together? Did she mean just living in the same house or really being close as a couple? She must have learned how to twist words from her job in broadcasting. Deshawn White used to play football for the local pro team. He did well in college and had potential in the pros until the team owner let him go. It was rumored the owner had an issue with Deshawn over a woman. Some said it was the owner's wife. Others said it was his daughter. It changed depending on who you asked. Deshawn was good-looking and charming after all. His wife was a stunning Asian-American swimsuit model who had to stop modeling because she was nearing 30. Deshawn loved talking and was easily convinced to leave football for a career in media. He fit naturally into the local news show with Lori, with his segment airing before hers. Technically, Lori wasn't lying. She didn't cheat with Deshawn while we were still living together. She waited until after I asked her to leave the house. We were still married legally, but she didn't see it that way. As for Deshawn's wife, that was a different story. She and Lori had been together for about 2 weeks before Lori told me she needed space. It turned out that Deshawn and his wife liked being with more than one person at the same time. They would set things up together. Usually Deshawn's wife would get close to a new girl, and then Deshawn would join in. They tried this routine on Lori and got her curious. They convinced her that being with another woman didn't count as cheating, but she didn't want to do anything with Deshawn. They then worked on her feelings of doubt and insecurity. She had more issues than I ever realized, which said a lot about our relationship. She was worried about losing herself in the marriage and also wondering what it would be like to be with other men and women. I had been her only lover, and now being around many attractive people every day, she was curious. They told her that being with someone while we were separated didn't count, especially if it happened during a trip to Europe. They said it would be like the saying, "What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas." She could let loose for a couple of weeks, and it would make our marriage stronger when she returned. Everything changed quickly after I asked her to leave. Lori moved in with Deshawn and his wife and started enjoying life and being with Deshawn that very night. Lori's idea of what counted as cheating changed rapidly. Deshawn was not discreet and told people at the station the next day about being with Lori. Soon enough, everyone knew, including someone who didn't approve of affairs and decided to inform me anonymously. That's when I got a lawyer. I paid him enough to hire a private investigator, but it wasn't really needed. Lori and the Dishons didn't even try to hide what they were doing. In 3 days, the investigators had plenty of photos of them kissing and being intimate in public. My lawyer included these pictures in the divorce papers. I helped spread the news by updating my Facebook status to single and posting a picture of Lori kissing Deshawn, her hand on him. I made sure the image was appropriate for all viewers for maximum impact. I also posted on Twitter tagging her when the preacher said, "Forsaking all others she heard, fortaking all others. Thanks, at @just_words, paraphrased. The story spread quickly and widely, but like intense fires, it burned out fast, and people soon forgot as the divorce went through the court. Even though Lori tried to stop everything by tearing up the documents, my lawyer kept pushing the case forward. It wasn't hard to prove our case because Lori didn't cooperate, but her behavior slowed everything down. Lori blamed me for everything that happened. My strong reaction to her wanting a break from the marriage was a shock to her. She thought we could still go out together when she wasn't busy. She expected me to take her out and make her love me again. However, she was also spending time with someone else. The issue was that she felt I wasn't being reasonable in letting her figure things out. I learned this after the Dishons shared their story during the divorce. Lori had told them everything after Dishon and she had been intimate, and they were eager to tell my lawyer and the court. The Dishons were upset because he was fired, or rather asked to consider other jobs while on unpaid leave. Meanwhile, Lori kept her position. The unpaid leave was just part of the negotiations for his firing. Dishon eventually made a good deal, especially after his lawyers threatened a wrongful termination lawsuit. Lori and Dishon broke the station's no dating policy. The station's response was technically legal, but the real issue was that the station owned their public images. This created a big distraction, especially with me and my lawyer making a fuss. The station wanted positive news like visits to sick kids or creative stories, not scandals that upset older viewers who bought the advertised products. Negative news was meant for national news programs, not local ones. The station wanted to fire Lori too, to be fair, but after the initial drama, Lori's online supporters complained about unfair treatment of women in the workplace. They also mentioned that she was pregnant, which I found out later. The station knew about the pregnancy soon after it happened and decided to put her on paid maternity leave quietly. They remembered she had a miscarriage in college and were careful about privacy. After the baby, they gave her a morning show where she could talk about various topics, including breastfeeding and dieting. Sometimes she even wore a bikini for the show, which helped with advertising. To be fair, she turned out to be a good host. She became confident as she grew into her broadcasting career and was great at making guests feel comfortable. She was funny, too, something I saw glimpses of when we were married. When she changed around me, acting more serious, it was a missed chance. Looking back, I see we got married too soon. Our marriage stopped us from growing as individuals. We should have been each other's first loves and moved on. But who wants to admit that? But we were married, and we had made promises. And if you can't keep promises, what do you have? What can you offer if your word means nothing? If she wanted something else, we should have just talked and ended the marriage. It would have been hard, but more honest. Neither of us wanted to admit we made a mistake. But that's what happened anyway, at least for me. I have no idea what she thought, tearing up all the divorce papers and thinking we were still married, even though she was seeing other people. I kept getting updates, even though I asked friends to stop. I think she wanted to stay married for the security. She never fully explained to the Dishons because she stopped talking to them after being served divorce papers at the airport. Seeing the scene at the airport on social media, Dishon canceled his European trip. He and his wife realized they had a public relations problem to deal with and told Lori to find somewhere else to stay. Lori then went back home, but I had already moved out. I left within 2 days of her leaving. I took 2 suitcases of my stuff and put everything else in storage. I went to stay with my sister. I didn't do much about the rented house and Lori's stuff, even though I couldn't throw it all out. One day while I was walking downtown, I remembered a passage from the Bible where Jesus says, "I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in." Feeling inspired, I went to Home Depot. I made 20 copies of my house key and gave them to the homeless people living under a bridge downtown. I also gave them the address and letters saying they could stay in the house as my guests. I even handed out $20 bills so they could take taxis there. Yes, I used money from Lori's credit card. The homeless people were unsure of my intentions, but the weather forecast warned of heavy rain that night, so they decided to take a chance. A couple of them camped in the yard at first, but after getting soaked, they moved inside. They had been in the house for nearly 10 days when Lori returned. I heard she was very surprised to see them. It took her 2 days to get them all to leave. She paid them to go. Luckily, they didn't leave much of a mess, but they did take a lot of things. They even took the toilets. They tried to take the washer and dryer, but couldn't get them out of the laundry room. I doubt Lori got her security deposit back. By then, I was hiding at my sister's place. When Lori asked my sister said I went to Norway, I did go to Europe later, but in a different direction. Since Lori got a refund for her own airline ticket, I was sure she wouldn't mind if I took a trip instead. The airfare was the last charge I made on her card. Actually, it was the second to last. The last purchase was a U-Rail 10 days within 2 months youth pass. I didn't think of myself as a youth at 23, almost 24, but URail considers you a youth until you turn 27. This ticket gave me 10 days of unlimited train travel over 2 months, plus ferry discounts. Perfect. Also, I had been taking some classes at a community college. With my student ID, I got all the museum discounts kids get. Very nice. My third to last charge on Laurie's card was 5 nights at the Doubletree Hilton in Chelsea, London. I had never traveled overseas before and heard that jet lag could be tough, so I wanted to be comfortable. That was good advice. I checked in early, took a shower, napped, and spent the day riding double-decker buses and walking around Westminster, the Palace, Hyde Park, and Kensington. I had fish and chips and good beer. It was the first time I smiled without thinking about being mean to Laurie. It felt like I was starting to let her go. I was sad, though. I felt like a failure. But crying isn't my thing. Sure, I get teary-eyed at sad TV shows or movies, and I did on the plane when they turned off the lights, thinking about how I wasted 5 years with a woman I couldn't rely on when it mattered. I thought about that as I looked at Laurie in the cafe, sipping her Cosmo. She put her glass down and looked at me seriously. "You've left me no choice. I'm going to have to get the big guns." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text message, inbound on Afterburner's Maverick. I smiled and looked up. Out of nowhere, my friend appeared, put her arm around me, sat on my lap, and kissed me on the lips. Then she looked at Laurie, who was watching in shock. "There's Malibu Barbie," my friend said with a smile. "Hi. Give me a vodka quickly, waiter," my friend then told the waiter, who seemed to be waiting for some drama to unfold. "Fast, fast, go-go," she added, chewing the waiter away. Surprisingly, he listened. Then she called out over Laurie's shoulder. "Hey, knitcap guy!" A scruffy man at a nearby table, who was wearing a knit cap even though it was summer, reluctantly turned around. "Yeah, you hipster. Take your tweet somewhere else." He looked like he wanted to say something, but my friend, when mad, was unstoppable. She looked like she might jump over the table and hit him with his own coffee mug, so he picked up his tablet and left. Most of the other people who had been listening in left too, leaving us alone on the patio. Laurie just watched in shock. I enjoyed the show. The waiter came back with a vodka, and my friend drank half of it. That guy was live tweeting your story. He looked just like his profile picture. I read everything you posted as I walked over here, so I know everything you and she said, up until she claimed she never cheated with Dishon while you were still together. She put her vodka down and held me at arm's length, smiling big at me while Laurie looked like she was about to explode in the background. "Good to see you again, Esteban." We ran into each other in London, my friend and me. Actually, she kind of pushed me out of the way. One nice thing about the Chelsea Hilton was the lounge near the lobby. I was there watching a crazy rainstorm through the window. I was glad to be inside and dry. I decided to try some wine instead of beer and was drinking something the bartender suggested. I had already had a couple of glasses when I saw her. Another nice thing about the hotel besides the bar was that all the reception clerks were very pretty Eastern European girls. Not model gorgeous, but the kind of pretty that makes guys want to be better just to deserve them. Dangerous pretty. I was ready to try and impress Joanna, the very pretty blonde Polish girl with green eyes at the desk that evening. I wanted to ask her questions about places to see in the city, hoping she might touch my hand as she showed me on the map. I was just about to start talking when a soaking wet person pushed me aside. It took me a moment to realize the wet person was actually a young woman soaked to the bone and quite upset. She was also very American in how loud she was. She started explaining her problems to Joanna when Joanna held up a hand to stop her. The wet girl paused. "Excuse me, miss," Joanna said, "but this gentleman was in front of you." The wet girl looked at me. I thought she couldn't possibly get any wetter unless she was underwater. Her dark hair was limp around her tired face. A big puddle stretched from her suitcase back to the door. I slowly looked at the puddle, then at her, then at Joanna, who was starting to smile at my reaction. She must have known I was a bit tipsy. "Joanna," I said, "I think she needs your help more than I do. I can wait." Joanna's smile grew, making her look even more amazing. I no longer wanted to live a better life just to deserve her. I wanted to live the best life possible, even if it meant doing something incredible like helping kids in need for many years before being with her. The wet girl showed a little relief. She then told Joanna a sad story about being booked at another Hilton far away because of her dad's Hilton points. There was a problem with her reservation. Her flight was delayed. Her ATM card wasn't working, so she didn't have much cash. She ended up on the tube, which had issues, and then the rainstorm hit. She came to this Hilton in Chelsea because the Hilton service person told her to check in person since there might be a room, but couldn't reserve it due to system problems. This was her last hope. Joanna listened kindly, then said she'd see what she could do. She started typing on her computer, her smile fading as she went. Finally, she sighed and told the girl the bad news. I had booked the last room, that guy over there as she pointed to me. They were fully booked. The wet girl looked at me with something close to hate, except she was too tired. Great. I'd need to do something big if I wanted to impress Joanna. Maybe I can help, I said. Both women looked at me. Joanna looked curious and a bit amused. The wet girl looked suspicious. The young lady can share my room until she finds something else, I said. Joanna looked shocked. The wet girl looked like she was ready to fight me for suggesting something improper. I then used my secret weapon. I held out my right hand, made a fist, and extended my pinky. I know there's only one bed in the room, but I promise to be a perfect gentleman while you're my guest. The wet girl looked surprised. Joanna's face lit up with a big smile. She was radiant again, clearly trying not to laugh. I hoped the wet girl would tell me to go away so I wouldn't have to actually share my room. Instead, I could talk to Joanna about my noble deed, reducing my need to prove myself worthy. Then I realized the big problem in my plan. The rat was desperate enough to seriously think about the offer. She turned to Joanna. "What do you think?" she asked. "Woman to woman?" Joanna looked at us both, amused. "He's been good today. We have his info in the computer in case anything happens, and it is a pinky promise." She let that thought hang. The rat hesitated. Then she said, "Deal," and hooked her pinky with mine. "Mess with me, though, and I'll hurt you," she added. I nodded that I understood. Joanna insisted on taking the rat's details and adding her to the reservation to keep me safe. I hadn't thought of that, but it made sense. The passport was one of the only things the rat had that was still dry. It was kept safe in plastic bags. I asked Joanna to have housekeeping bring some extra hangers because I was sure the soaked rat would want to hang up her things. Joanna nodded, still smiling as we went to the elevators. "Steve," I said, extending my hand. "Margaret," she replied, shaking it. "Call me Maggie, though, and I'll slap you," she added. I looked at her. "Maggie, Maggie, Maggie Bo Baggy," I said, closing my eyes, expecting a hit and sticking my lips out. When no hit came, I opened my eyes. Despite herself, she was smiling. "Just checking." I said, "I'm too tired now. I'll hit you later." As the elevator went up to our floor, I said, "You have a lot of anger issues. You've threatened me at least 3 times. She looked at me and said, "You have no idea." I let her into the room. She found one mostly dry set of clothes buried deep in her suitcase. With the extra hangers, she began to hang things up to dry. I told her I would be down in the lounge and to come for something to eat once she had showered and warmed up. I went back to the lobby and found Joanna talking quietly with Alexandra, an equally pretty blonde Hungarian receptionist. They stopped talking when they saw me and smiled. Both raised their right hands, extended their pinkies, wiggled them, and then started giggling. The bartender had kept my tab open and asked if I wanted another glass of Merlot. I did. 30 minutes later, Margaret came down refreshed from the shower wearing sweatpants and a sweatshirt. She looked nice, not stunning, but very nice. Her dried, wavy dark hair made a big difference. She wore flip-flops, which likely meant her shoes and socks were still wet. Her delicate feet had blue-painted toenails that matched her fingernails. Her face is what got me. Her alert eyes and broad smile promised mischief. I looked into her hazel eyes and immediately wondered how I could keep a pinky promise honorably. I glanced at Joanna and Alexandra, who were pretending not to watch, and tried to calm down. The bartender came over. Margaret surprised me by ordering a double shot of vodka and then a glass of wine to catch up with me. The bartender chuckled and got her drinks. "Maggie, you're going to get messed up," I told her. She locked eyes with me. "I told you, don't call me Maggie. I hate that nickname. It's what my jerk ex-boyfriend used to call me before we broke up." "Sorry," I said. "What does everyone else call you?" "Everyone else calls me Margie. But I don't like that anymore either. I'm here in Europe this summer to start my year abroad early and to reinvent myself. Margie was the girl who let some cheating jerk call her Maggie and say he loved her and then cheat on her. Margie's parents said to forgive him because boys will be boys. That Margie is dead. My new life starts tonight. The bartender came back with her drinks. She downed the vodka before he even put the wine glass on the table. The bartender raised an eyebrow at me and walked away. "What about Peggy?" I asked. She already had the wine to her lips. "No one has ever called me Peggy," she said. "It's a form of Margaret," I said. "I know, but no one's ever used it. My middle name is Susan, so you can see why we both laughed." "Okay," I said, "I get it. Peggy's okay, not Peggy Sue." "Let's give it a try," she said as we clinked wine glasses. "What's your story, Steve?" "Yet Steve, he's married to a cheater and has just filed for divorce to start his life over." "Misery loves company, huh?" she asked. "Guess so." "What about Stefan?" "No, too close to Steve." "Etienne? Never." "What's your last name?" "Miller." Peggy started to smile. "How about Esteban Molinero? It's the Spanish form of your name. You can be a Latin lover." I chuckled. "Okay, Senior Rita Peggy. I am the famous bullfighter. Esteban Molinero from Toledo, but not the one in Ohio. You shall be my flamenco dancing sister." We laughed, clinked glasses again, and ordered sandwiches. We ate, drank more wine, and shared stories, although I kept my story vague. After a bit, we decided to call it a night. As we walked past the front desk, Joanna and Alexandra gave me stern looks when Peggy wasn't watching. They wiggled their pinkies at me, reminding me of my promise. They seemed to think I might break it, maybe because I had let my eyes wander to Peggy's behind as she led us to the elevators. It was hard not to notice. It was quite something. I made a circle with my thumb and index finger on one hand and moved my other pinky in and out of it, wiggling my eyebrows at Joanna and Alexandra. I had drunk enough to feel brave enough to do that. To be honest, things would never work out with Joanna. Same with Alexandra. I wasn't about to make it through medical school. Alexandra, despite my silliness, laughed quietly while Joanna, standing with her hands on her hips, gave me a piercing glare. I just smiled and waved as we walked away. When we got to the room, Peggy washed her face and brushed her teeth. She looked at me, climbed into the king-sized bed in her sweats, and fell into a deep sleep quickly. I noticed she took the same side of the bed that Laura used to sleep on. I drank a couple of glasses of water to avoid a hangover, changed into sleep shorts and a t-shirt, and also got into bed. I had seen enough of Peggy's body, even in her baggy clothes, to get a bit excited, so it took me a while to fall asleep. Her snoring, thanks to the alcohol, helped me relax, and I finally drifted off. I woke up first to find Peggy cuddled up to me, half lying on my left side with her arm across my chest. Laura used to do that too. I figured Peggy must have slept this way with her boyfriend. My left arm was around her and my hand was resting on her lower back. With Laura, I would have let my hand wander lower to wake her up gently. It took all my self-control not to do the same with Peggy. A few moments later, Peggy started to wake up, looking groggy and disoriented. When she realized where she was and who she was with, she quickly pulled away, looking embarrassed. "Sorry," we both said at the same time and then laughed. "It's okay." We both said again and laughed some more. We moved to opposite sides of the bed and dozed off a bit. The biggest surprise came when we fully woke up. We weren't as hungover as we had expected. Peggy noticed that most of her clothes had dried overnight. She took a shower first while I looked out the window. The sky was clear and blue, a big change from the previous night's rain. When she came out, I asked her to check if either of the girls from last night was at the front desk. She asked why, and I told her they'd probably want to know if I kept my pinky promise. She laughed and went out. After she left, I had my shower. Alexandra was at the desk, but Joanna wasn't there. Maybe they were working double shifts. When I walked in, I saw Alexandra and Peggy leaning close, talking softly. They got quiet as soon as they saw me. I greeted them and headed to the restaurant for breakfast. Peggy joined me soon after. I never asked about their conversation. At breakfast, Peggy said I had been a gentleman the night before, so I could join her for a tour of the city if I wanted to. I wasn't going to turn down that offer. I accepted right away. We had a wonderful day. We walked along the river to Parliament, then west to the Victoria Memorial, just in time to see the changing of the guard. We had a light lunch, walked through Hyde Park, and ended up in Notting Hill, where she insisted on having afternoon tea. It was funny. I had visited these places yesterday, but it was much more fun today with Peggy. She had a pretty smile and was easy to talk to. We were in a cozy place with sofas instead of chairs, drinking more tea to fight off jet lag, and because we were in London. I felt like I couldn't drink any more tea without bursting when I noticed Peggy frowning at her phone. "What's wrong? Wi-Fi problem?" I asked. "No," she replied, still looking at her phone. "I'm trying to find updates on a story I was following before I left the States. It's frustrating. It was all over the news a couple of weeks ago, but now there's nothing." "What story?" I asked. "There's this local TV weather lady who is cheating on her husband with a sportscaster from her show. The husband found out and put it all over Twitter and Facebook. Both she and the sports guy got fired. I haven't seen any updates in weeks and I'm getting antsy," she explained. I felt a chill run through me. The night before, I had told her my wife cheated and we were getting a divorce, but hadn't shared much more. Peggy had mostly talked about her cheating boyfriend. I decided to play it cool. "Why are you so interested?" "Because it's kind of like what happened to me," she said, looking up from her phone. "I want to reach out to the guy and tell him it'll be okay. Besides, he's probably good-looking. If the weather lady is that attractive, her husband is probably handsome." "I'd like to cheer him up," she said with a slight smile and a glance. I couldn't help it. I started to laugh. I had a pretty big ego, or I did until my wife cheated on me. I'm not super fit. I don't see myself as a hottie. I don't have six-pack abs. I'm just a regular guy who stays in decent shape. And now, half the internet thinks I'm a loser because my gorgeous wife cheated on me. Peggy looked confused. "What's so funny? Have you seen pictures of the guy the weather girl is married to?" "No, he's kept a low profile. None of the stories have pictures of him. His Twitter profile is just his wife kissing the sports guy. Everything else on his social media is private except posts about her cheating. His accounts don't even show his full name. His friends aren't talking to anyone either." "What's the weather girl's name?" "Lori Miller." She frowned as she put two and two together. "Are you telling me she's related to you, Esteban?" "Not exactly." I pulled out my phone. I had deleted all pictures of Lori, but I could still find them in the recently deleted folder. I found one from our trip to the Bahamas to celebrate her new job. We were at the beach wearing bathing suits. Lori was looking up at me with love while I looked at the camera. A waiter took the picture, but he didn't set it up well. I handed my phone to Peggy. "No way. Yes way, I'll take my hug now, but I should tell you us hotties prefer kisses over hugs. That can wait until the hotel, though." If Peggy heard me, she ignored it. She was busy examining the photo, zooming in to see all sorts of details. "Wow," she finally said, handing the phone back and looking at me with sympathy. "She's beautiful." She then turned fully towards me on the sofa, pulled her legs up in a cross-legged position, put her elbows on her knees and her chin in her hands, looked me straight in the eyes, smiled and said, "Tell me everything." I did, starting from when Lori and I first met. She asked questions here and there, but mostly just listened. She had me repeat the fact that Lori's credit card was paying for our hotel stay, my Urele pass, and my legal fees for the divorce. She laughed hard at that. I had to tell her twice about inviting all the homeless people to live in the house after I left because she was laughing so much. Finally, I ran out of things to say. Telling it all felt good. We paid the bill and went outside to find somewhere to eat. As soon as we stepped outside, Peggy was in my arms, hugging me tightly and telling me everything would be all right. I hugged her back, but more gently. Then we went looking for a Chinese restaurant, arm in arm, singing Warren Zevon's Werewolves of London. Her howls were better than mine. She did them seriously, I didn't. Come on, it's not a serious song. That night at the hotel, Joanna was back on duty. She smiled at us and waved her pinky. She did the same and laughed all the way to the elevators. With her clothes dry, Peggy climbed into bed wearing a long t-shirt and panties. I really wanted to cuddle up to her, but I had made a pinky promise. When I got into bed, she asked me to hold her. I waited for a moment, thinking of random stuff to stop my mind from wandering before I did. As I spun against her, she wiggled her hips and arranged my arms so I was holding her like she wanted. "I asked you because I love sleeping cuddled up, and I know I can trust you even though we just met yesterday," she said as she placed my right hand on her stomach. I couldn't help it. I got excited again. Even with that, she whispered, wiggling her hips again. "Down, boy," she said, laughing and kissing my hand. "Why? Why what?" she asked. "Why do you know you can trust me when we just met yesterday?" She turned her head to look at me. "Any guy that makes a pinky promise is a hopeless romantic. I think you're the kind of guy who stays loyal. I bet you're really reliable, too. I bet I could trust you with my money." I looked down at her. "You make it sound bad." She just smiled and shrugged. I turned off the light. As we settled down, I whispered in her ear, "The only reason I wouldn't run away with your money is because the hotel room is paid for the rest of the week. It'll do." A few moments later, I heard her breathing deep in as she fell asleep. I leaned over and saw the smile still on her face. She did feel nice in my arms. Somehow I fell asleep too. In the morning when I woke up, we were back in the position of her lying on my side with her arm across my chest, my hand on her back. Once again, I didn't move it because I had made a pinky promise. This time when she woke up, neither of us said we were sorry. I made a happy discovery. This morning we weren't hungover and I felt like going for a run. I wanted to be a good host, so I gently suggested I was going out and explained why if Peggy didn't mind. "Oh, no, you're not," she quickly interrupted, surprising me. Before I could say anything, she added, "Not without me." Suddenly, she was digging into her suitcase, grabbing clothes and disappearing into the bathroom. She came out wearing tight black running shorts and a bright blue sports bra with a running singlet over it. I stood there stunned as she looked at me. "I thought you wanted to run Esteban. Hurry up, let's go." I got dressed quickly. Before I knew it, we were running along the Chelsea embankment on the north side of the Thames, heading east. She was shorter and lighter than me, but she made me push myself. Even when I wanted to slow down, she kept going strong. As a guy, I couldn't let her outpace me, so I kept up. For 3 miles, we crossed Vauxhall Bridge and headed back west. We zipped through Battersea Park, and Peggy showed no signs of slowing down. We crossed the river again at the Albert Bridge. Back on the Chelsea embankment, she started to run faster. My pride wouldn't let me fall behind, so I sped up too. We ended up racing back to where we started. She won. My lungs felt like they would burst. "That was a good light run to shake off the cobwebs," she said, smiling. I knew she was joking with me. I let you win because I'm a gentleman. Ha! That day we visited the Tower of London and the London Eye. Later we went to a pub near Tower Bridge. We sat there enjoying the chatter in the busy bar. I thought about how easy it was to be with her. She was looking at her phone but could tell I was watching her. "What?" she asked. I shrugged. I was just thinking how this trip turned out much better than I expected. Peggy looked at me, and she made up her mind about something. "We need to find you a date," she said. I laughed. Yeah. When was the last time you went out with someone?" No point in lying. I had told her a lot already. "A couple of months ago," she shook her head. "A couple? Back in May, it wasn't anything serious. I would have been happier alone. We need to fix that." I said nothing as she thought. After a moment, she smiled. "I know," she said. "I can be your wingman and help you meet girls." I laughed, but she looked serious even though she was smiling. A wingman is usually a guy friend who helps out. You're not a guy. Same idea. By being with you, I show other women that you're safe. I tell them a bit about you, making sure they know you're a good guy. You'll be dating in no time. What's in it for you? Just helping a friend who helped me. What do you say, Maverick? You know that Top Gun movie is really about a guy's struggle with his own identity, right? What? Shut up! All the characters have deeper meanings. Look it up online. Peggy thought for a moment. Are you saying that the movie has made you rethink things? Maybe. That's why you need to get back into the dating scene. What about you? You had the worst breakup. We'll focus on you first. After you find someone, then you can help me. I looked at her. She was serious about helping me find someone. You wouldn't need any help, I told her. All you'd have to do is smile at a guy. She blushed and nudged me but didn't say anything else. Just then, a Spanish female university soccer team came into the pub, all wearing matching jackets with their team's name, Los Aguilas, the Eagles. Peggy brightened up immediately. We have a lot of new people here now, Maverick. If you start singing, you've lost that love and feeling I'm leaving and getting a ride back to the hotel. I'll do better, she said, and then called to the girls. Hey, girls, who won? The closest one, a small girl with black eyes, turned around and replied in perfect English, We won. Because there were no seats left, she and two friends joined Peggy and me. I'm Peggy. "He's Esteban," she said, pointing at me. The girls all smiled. "Esteban," I shrugged. "It's a long story." Peggy took charge. "Esteban, be useful. Go get these ladies something to drink." They all wanted beer, so the order was easy. When I came back, they were deep into a conversation in Spanish. They paused to look at me as I delivered the drinks. The talkative one, Sonia, asked me, "Esteban, if you are still married, why no ring?" I glared at Peggy, who just smiled innocently. "I sold it after I knew my ex had a boyfriend." Sonia and Veronica laughed. The third girl, Patricia, was busy with her phone. She got excited and showed something to the others. Peggy whispered, "They're checking out your story. I know Sonia is more outgoing, but Veronica is more interested. She keeps looking at you and playing with her hair." "Go for it, champ," Peggy said, getting up and heading to the bathroom. She left me alone with the group of girls. "Want to talk about it?" asked Veronica. I noticed Peggy was right. Veronica did have the best body and the prettiest face. Her straight black hair matched her dark eyes. Her full red lips and bright white teeth stood out. "No," I said honestly. "Tell me about your game and what you're doing here." The girls lit up and started talking excitedly. They told me about their university's sister school in England. Every summer they played soccer against each other. The Spanish team usually won. Most of them still lived with their parents, so this trip was a big deal for them. Sonia and Patricia had one more year before they graduated. Veronica was studying to be a doctor, so she had 3 more years. Peggy came back and sat next to me. She slowly stroked my leg and then pushed something into my pocket. I gave her a side eye. She kept talking to Sonia and Patricia. Veronica was looking between us, chest out. I noticed and then met her eyes. She smiled and leaned in, whispering, "Is Peggy your girlfriend now?" "No, she's just a friend." She looked like she didn't believe me, so I explained more. "She's actually my wingman." "Wingman?" "Like in fighter planes, she has my back." Veronica thought hard about it, then smiled. "Why isn't she after you herself? I promised her I'd be a gentleman." Veronica laughed and shared this with Sonia and Patricia. Peggy confirmed my story, and they all thought it was funny. After a good laugh, Veronica said she felt hot and needed some air. She got up and headed to the door. Sonia and Patricia looked at me, and Peggy poked me. "I'll go check on her," I said, and followed Veronica outside. Outside, I found Veronica leaning over the railing by the river. Tower Bridge and the Tower of London were in the background. I felt my pocket and found 3 condoms. I hid them in my pants and joined Veronica. "If I drink too much beer, I just get sleepy," she said. "Want to walk to wake up?" "Okay." We walked along the river, enjoying the evening. We found a place selling ice cream and sat on a bench. She asked again why I wasn't interested in Peggy. She didn't believe my promise story at first. Then she told me about growing up in Madrid with a big family spread out over different countries. She was the youngest of 4 children. I finally told her about Lori. After my story, Veronica moved closer. She tried to kiss my cheek, but I turned to say something, and we ended up kissing. It surprised us both. I realized she wasn't drunk and kissed her back. Just as things heated up, her phone buzzed with a message. "Ah," she said. "The bus is leaving. They are waiting for me." We ran back to find the team waiting. They cheered and chanted, "Kiss her, kiss her." So I did, just to be polite. Before she left, she said, "I want to see you again when your life settles down. And if you're divorced, I have many options back home, so hurry up with the divorce." She talked to Peggy quickly and then got on the bus. Peggy and I watched it leave. I wondered what she had said to Peggy, but didn't ask. As we walked to get an Uber, Peggy asked, "How many of the condoms do you still have?" "All of them." "Did you at least kiss her?" I stopped. "You did kiss her?" Peggy asked. "I realized I messed up. I didn't get her number or email or even her last name, and now she's gone." Peggy smiled. "Relax, Maverick. I'm here to watch your back, remember? Sonia, Patty, and I took care of everything while you were out. We checked on each of you, and I emailed you all the details while you 2 were talking." She said that to me with a cheeky grin. I just stared at her. "Herrera," she said. "What? Her last name?" "Her full name is Veronica Maria de Los Angeles Herrera Gutierrez." She said the name with a flourish. "You're something else." "I know." I gave her a playful tap and then put my arm around her as we walked along the river. Back at the hotel, we climbed into bed. "Just so you know, Maverick, that was some kiss. Just like a woman to make me feel special and then leave," I said casually, trying to hide how I felt. That comment got a mysterious look from her. What? Peggy just shook her head and looked at me in a way I couldn't understand. I broke the awkward silence by saying, she said you had a nice figure. She's looked didn't change. I couldn't read her face at all, so I faced the other way to turn off the light. Do you want me to hold you tonight? I asked. No, she said flatly. She rolled onto her side, away from me. Worried that I had upset her, I left it at that. After a bit, I fell into a light sleep. About 30 minutes later, I woke up to a strange sound. It was a mix of rubbing and heavy breathing. The bed was moving a little. I listened for a moment and realized Peggy was awake. I turned to face her. She stopped what she was doing when she noticed I was awake. Veronica had definitely stirred something in me, but then she left. That moment decided it for me. Our promise didn't cover one of us just watching while the other felt left out. You know it feels much better if you're being held tightly, I told her. Without waiting for her reply, I put my left hand behind her neck and reached over with my right to touch her shoulder. I moved in to kiss her. She didn't pull away and after a moment started kissing back. I stopped the kiss. Go ahead and relax, I told her softly. She looked concerned in the dim light. The promise still stands. I'm not going to take advantage of you, but you need to feel free to relax completely. She said nothing, but quickly got comfortable and lay back down. Her breathing got faster. She waited until I had my arms around her again before she felt at ease. I kissed her again, and she responded eagerly. You're safe with me, I assured her. Her breathing grew more steady as she let herself find comfort in the moment. She tried hard to relax, and it showed in her eyes as they slowly closed in concentration. I kissed her forehead, and she held on to me tightly. You can always trust me, Peggy, I whispered. She just nodded, her eyes still closed. I laid back, knowing that she needed this space to feel secure. I watched over her as she drifted off to sleep, understanding that our bond was about more than just promises. It was about trust. Her breathing slowed as she slept, and I quietly lay beside her, feeling peaceful in the shared silence. In the morning, she looked at me with a gentle smile. Thank you, she whispered. Many times, I replied, grateful for the deepening trust between us. Instead, I just hugged her. After a few minutes, she turned to me and kissed me. She realized something, but kissed me even more. She smiled in a naughty way and started to take off my t-shirt. I had to sit up to help. She threw the shirt off the bed. Then she began pulling my shorts down, and I lifted my hips to help her. When I was naked, she took hold of me, moved her hand up and down a few times, and then lay down between my legs. She started to pleasure me and looked up to see if I enjoyed it. I did. After a while, she moved up my body, sat on my hips, and lowered herself onto me. She looked up and made a sound as she took me all the way inside. Then she laid down on me and moved her hips slowly while kissing me. I tried to talk, but she kissed me again. Soon I felt close. I tried to warn her, but she kissed me again. She slowed down, keeping me on edge for what felt like ages. Then she slowly sped up. I thought she was doing it for me, but then she went still and tensed up as she finished. She rested on my chest for a moment before kissing me again. Your turn, she said with a lazy smile. It's been too long. She sat up and began bouncing on me. Tell me when you're close, she said. It wasn't long before I told her now. She quickly got off and took me in her mouth. Soon I was letting go and she was swallowing everything. After a moment, she lay down beside me with her back to me. Now you can hug me from behind. I did. Peggy stroked my arms as I held her. But then I started to feel bad and needed to talk. That was great, but I feel like I just cheated. Without missing a beat, she said, Of course you did, but Malibu Barbie did it first and more times. You're just catching up. I laughed. Who cared about Lori now? I was talking about Veronica. Peggy laughed. Oh, her, you're fine. Before she got on the bus, she asked me to take care of you until she could. She said, Take him to bed if you want, but don't take his heart. What? Yeah, she told me. Plus her friends gave me all the info. She's super focused on her studies. She wants to be a doctor and always gets the best grades. For some reason, she likes you. She's probably just having fun right now, but wants to make sure you're around when you figure out your life. So my job, if I choose to accept it, is to keep you busy until you get your act together. She smiled over her shoulder at me. That's a strange plan, I said. Oh, like you have anything better going on. Well, when you put it like that, just don't fall in love with me. I'll try not to. Peggy turned to face me then. I'm serious. I think you're the type. You're not into casual stuff, and that's fine, but let's just enjoy the moment, okay? I must have looked unsure because Peggy pressed harder. Pinky, promise you won't fall in love with me. She stuck out her pinky. Deal, I said, as long as you agree to. Ha! She grinned. Not gonna happen. I pretended to be hurt. What? I didn't just amaze you. You did fine. She took my hand, turned so I was hugging her from behind, and wrapped my arm around her. Before falling asleep, she said, You did well enough that I can say this. Malibu Barbie is foolish to let you go, and I thought she was supposed to be smart. She's not a meteorologist. She's a weather reporter. Seems like it. She was quiet for a moment. Was she right? Who? Veronica? About what? My butt? Is it nice? Heck yeah, I didn't need her to tell me that. I noticed on the first night if it weren't for the pinky deal, I would have gone all out as soon as we came upstairs. Good to know. She paused again. What about my chest? I reached around, cupped them, and gave a light squeeze. They fit perfectly. They're great. I kissed her neck, and she wiggled her butt against me, moving my hands lower around her stomach. Then she said, And for the record, if Malibu Barbie made you not like girls, you'd be really bad at it. We woke up still hugging. I would have liked to stay like that, but Peggy said it was time to go for a run before breakfast since we had a busy day ahead. We planned to visit Windsor that morning. For our run, we went through Chelsea, Belgravia, past Buckingham Palace, and into Hyde Park. We had to go slower because of the traffic and remembering they drove on the other side of the road. It was a humid morning, so we got back to the hotel all sweaty. We had left through a side door, avoiding reception. But coming back, we saw Joanna and Alexandra at the desk again. As we passed, Peggy held my hand and swung it so the girls could see. They noticed, and their eyes widened. Peggy smiled broadly at them. I just shrugged. Back in the room after I took off my shirt, Peggy wanted to smell my chest and taste the sweat. She said I smelled awful. I was about to respond when she suddenly took off all her clothes except for her shoes and socks. We got on our hands and knees on the bed and told me she wanted to start the day with a quick morning session. Luckily, I could help. We then showered and went down for breakfast, passing Joanna and Alexandra, who both laughed at us. As we ate, I remembered how Lori always wanted to shower right after we were together. That was the last time I thought of her that day. For the rest of our time in London, Peggy and I were like honeymooners. We were always touching each other. After our day at Windsor Castle, we went to the British Museum. On our last day, as we checked out to catch our train to Dover, Joanna was settling our bill. Peggy leaned over to her and whispered, I want you to know he was a perfect gentleman, but I wasn't very ladylike. She smiled big, and Joanna laughed. Then Joanna raised an eyebrow and asked, and he gets the job done. They both giggled. After Lori, I was happy with any kind of praise, so I just smiled. Peggy and Joanna finally stopped giggling, kissed each other on both cheeks, and we left. After a taxi ride, we snuggled on the train to Dover. On the ferry to Belgium, we stayed close on the deck while crossing the channel. Peggy wore my jacket because it was windy. At that moment, I realized it had been a long time since I thought about Lori, and I was glad she was my ex. Peggy and I had a great weekend in Amsterdam. While we sat in a cafe before our train to Berlin, I called my divorce lawyer. It had been over a month since Lori said she wanted to separate, and more than 3 weeks since she got the divorce papers. My lawyer said the deadline for her to respond had passed. We could ask for a default judgment, but my lawyer wanted proof of Lori's cheating, just in case. Since Lori was paying for everything, I agreed. Peggy watched me as I was on the phone. She didn't respond? Nope. Did she even call your lawyer? Nope. Did she try to call or email you? I got a new phone and number and blocked her email, so I don't know. Did she try to reach you through friends or family? They all have strict orders to tell her that I'm on an oil rig off the coast of Norway. She gave up after calling some of them a few weeks ago. Peggy shook her head. For someone who said she wouldn't leave you, she isn't trying very hard. I handed my phone to her. Maybe you can call her and tell her to fight for me. Would you be willing to have a fun competition for me? Peggy looked like she was thinking it over. We might get great ratings. Veronica and I could team up. How much does your ex weigh? Probably about 10 pounds more than you, but it's not muscle. I haven't heard any complaints so far, Peggy said. I'm not complaining. Yours are perfect for me. Hers just make men act dumb, including me. I don't think you were dumb. You didn't cheat on her. They didn't ask me, I said, pretending to cry. Come on, Peggy said with a smile. We have to catch the train. Our train crossed northern Germany as we read and napped, Peggy leaning on my shoulder. A little more than halfway there in Hanover while we waited for new passengers, I looked at her. You know, you have been a terrible wingman. You haven't helped me meet any other girls since you took the job. She kept looking at our hands. It turns out I like you too much. She pulled me into a kiss. A businessman opened the compartment door, saw us, and found another seat. We laughed and snuggled back together. The next 6 weeks were a blur of trains, long walks, museums, churches, and special moments, but not all at once and running. Peggy was always ready to run a 10K early in the morning, except on Mondays, our rest days. I ran more than ever and lost 5 pounds, even with all the eating and drinking. The morning runs kept me motivated. After Berlin, we went south to Prague, then Vienna, Venice, Rome, Florence, Nice, and finally Paris. What made it work for us without fighting was giving each other space. We often parted ways after lunch to do our own things for a few hours, then met for coffee around 4 o'clock, had a nice dinner, and took a walk. We usually didn't stay out too late because Peggy wanted to make sure we were well rested for our runs. I'd say she was driving me crazy, but it was a good kind of crazy. I hardly thought of Laurie at all. After London, we were staying in cheaper places like small hotels and Airbnbs. I wasn't using Laurie's money anymore. I paid for the places we stayed, and Peggy paid for most of the food and travel that our Euro passes didn't cover. I still had most of the $15,000 cash advance I took from Laurie's credit card, plus some money I took out from my retirement funds. I know it was dumb to mess with those savings, but I was not even 24. I had time to start over. I just wanted the money to last long enough before needing a real job again. Speaking of ages, I found out during a pricey nighttime gondola ride in Venice for Peggy's birthday that she was only 19. She had skipped a grade and started college at 17. She seemed older, like she was 21. On our last full day in Paris, we spent the morning at the Rodin Museum and then went to the Musée d'Orsay to see more sculptures. Here we sat in a cafe having a second espresso because one tiny cup never feels like enough. It was a hot August day, even though it was just noon. We felt lazy about lunch, and we're thinking about having gelato first, then lunch, then more gelato. We were leaning towards that plan. The next day, we would take a train to Barcelona, arriving late in the afternoon. We wanted to stay there for a few days and then find a quieter town near the beach. From there, we'd head up to Madrid for Peggy to start her junior year abroad at the Complutense University in a few weeks. We wanted to explore Madrid and settle her in the apartment she had arranged with another student. I had no clue what I would do after that. Things between us were heading toward an ending, and I wasn't looking forward to it. I wondered if I should contact Veronica once Peggy got settled. We had shared some nice moments, but I didn't know how serious she was. She had emailed a bit and had a few phone calls, but it wasn't the same as seeing each other. Peggy and I were often comfortable just being quiet together, but she broke the silence. You promised, remember? You pinky promised me not to fall in love with me. I did the same. Remember that? She wasn't looking at me, but staring at the towers of Notre Dame over some rooftops. I waited a moment before saying, "That's the hardest promise I ever made." Me too. We both got teary-eyed, but our sunglasses hid it. Just then, the waiter came over and I asked for the bill. "We'll be sad, of course," she said, "but we'll get over it and maybe we'll stay friends." I wondered if I could see her again without feeling sad. You know you can't stay with me because one of the main points of this study abroad program is to push yourself out of your comfort zone, right? And you make me too comfortable. I was about to argue, but she stopped me. I know you'd be supportive, but it's different. This is something I need to do mostly by myself, or it's not worth it. And I hate to sound like Laurie, but I'm only 19. I'm not ready to settle down. She finally looked at me sadly. I took her hand. You seem pretty smart for a teenager, I said. Did you skip a grade or something? She laughed and cried at the same time and hugged me tightly. The waiter returned with the bill, but left quickly when he saw us. I hugged her back and let out a couple of tears, too. For a bit, we relaxed and I held her at arm's length. Does this mean we have to stop being close? I asked. She smiled. Not for a couple of weeks, no. We looked into each other's eyes for a moment. And we'll help each other find dates when we start seeing other people, right? She said. At least until you figure out where you're going. She frowned. Where are you going anyway? I'm going to Madrid with you after that, no idea. Any idea how long you'll stay? At least until my money runs low, then we need to find you a rich, bored girlfriend until Veronica or someone else comes along. But here's the deal. Use protection with anyone else unless we're sure about them. Then we tell each other. And if we decide to be close to ease tension, that's okay. Agreed? She held out her pinky finger. I hooked mine with hers. Pinky promise. A playful smile crossed Peggy's face. If you're still married to Lori, maybe you can get another card. She's got money. I saw she's got a show starting in the spring. Thanks for the info. I haven't been checking up on her. My lawyer says things are moving along, but no to the card. I'd have to fly home, find her, break in, search her stuff, and take more cards. Too much work, and it's too hot to move from this chair. She'd probably cancel them anyway. The Aries thing looks easier while Veronica's studying, assuming Veronica's still interested. Peggy stopped smiling and looked worried. Unless I'm completely wrong, she's starting to show a baby bump. That was news to me. Peggy looked embarrassed, but I couldn't help myself. Veronica's showing a baby bump? All I did was kiss her. No, dummy, Peggy said, hitting my thigh. I'm talking about Malibu Barbie. One of the gossip sites had a bikini picture of her at the beach. They brought up an old story and made a snide comment like, on a hot day like today, a former local weather girl looks like she might be expecting. She shook her head. I was doing the math in my head and stopped Peggy's next question. I bet €5 it's not mine. Since March, I've used protection and been careful every time. I told her birth control pills weren't reliable and worried how she'd look on TV if she got pregnant. But really, I was worried she wasn't being faithful. It's not impossible, but it's unlikely. It's either Dishon or one of her other boyfriends who's the father. I was surprised she wasn't using this to slow the divorce, but she seemed to be ignoring everything instead. My mom finally called after the baby bump pictures appeared online. My sister had told her and my dad to back off because I didn't want any. I told you so's. Before I left the States, my sister had already given me one. My mom sounded relieved when I said it was unlikely mine. She wasn't ready to be a grandma in her early 50s, especially if Blondie, her name for Lori, was the mother. Back in the cafe in the States, I said to Peggy, Lori just told me she's going to get the big guns. Peggy looked confused. The big guns? Does she have a battleship? She asked, pretending to be serious as she looked at Lori. Lori's face turned red with anger. I had to hide my face in Peggy's neck as I tried not to laugh. Peggy was smirking. Introducing my husband to his son and daughter, Lori yelled. Peggy looked surprised. A son and a daughter? Twins? Congratulations, Esteban. I didn't know you were that active after that European summer we shared when you got free from Malibu Barbie. She turned to Lori. How old are they? When are their birthdays? Lori ignored Peggy but answered me. They're 4.5 years old. They were born the January after he left me. Peggy started counting on her fingers. She looked back at me when she got to 9. That would mean April before our summer together. What do you think? I used protection that month, too. You owe me €5, I said to her. To Lori, I said, bring on the DNA tests, Barbie. I hadn't meant to, but I was copying Peggy with the Barbie dig. But when the tests show neither is mine. What's your story then? That Lloyd forced you? I said this lightly. My lawyer found out Lori left the father's name blank on the birth certificates. Lloyd was her cameraman. He was short and a little hairy, bald with just a fringe of hair and a big mustache, but his body was hairy too. He was heavy with a big belly. I'd seen him in the shower at a gym once. Lori's station was doing a charity thing. That's the only reason I'd ever shower with the guy. I said his name because I knew from the divorce that she hadn't started seeing Dishon when any kid would have been conceived, and Lloyd seemed the least likely. Lori surprised me. She slumped in her chair, then suddenly sat up, leaned forward like she was going to be sick. Pale and sweating, she finally sat up and hugged herself. He didn't force me, she said quietly. We just got drunk one night when I was mad at you and things went too far. You were right about those birth control pills. They weren't reliable. And I got lazy about taking them. How did you find out? Did he tell you? I was trying to keep it quiet. The last thing I want is to see him for visits. I didn't even think he knew. He must have guessed. Peggy just stared at her. She handed me her half-drunk vodka, and I finished it. "Wow," Peggy said. Lori looked at me, begging with her eyes. "I found out," I told her, "because I was sure any kid you had couldn't be mine. We hardly touched each other in the last months we were together. Everything else I said was a bad joke. And then you confessed. That's how I found out." Lori fell back in her chair. She looked like she was about to say something, but we got interrupted. "Stay away from him!" a pregnant woman with dark hair shouted at Peggy. Peggy looked over my head and shouted back, "It's just a fling. It means nothing. You won't lose anything. He'll love you more when we're done." Peggy's face showed a mocking smile. Lori was confused, watching both of them. I kept quiet. The angry woman was Veronica. She looked furious, like she was ready to fight. "Get up!" she demanded. "You know how it works," Peggy answered. "You have to tag in." They high-fived with big smiles, and Peggy got off my lap to hug Veronica. Veronica hugged Peggy back and then sat on my lap. Peggy took an empty seat like a wrestling match. Yes, I did hook up with Veronica. I know you have to be brave to win a fair lady and all that. I wish people would believe I was a romantic lover who found the love of my life quickly, melting her heart with sweet music. But that would not be true. The truth is, someone wiser than me decided I couldn't handle my own feelings, needed instructions, and had to hurry up. That person was my friend. I can't say she was wrong. What happened was this. After some great days in Barcelona, we traveled down the Mediterranean coast of Spain to a town called Oliva in Valencia. We got very lucky when Peggy found an Airbnb apartment near the beach during the busy season. This was a sudden decision. We knew we wanted some beach time before going to Madrid, but had no exact place in mind. Peggy somehow decided on this town and managed the details. It was really her schedule driving us because she needed to get ready for school soon. I just had to figure out my life, but had no deadlines. Our new plan was to stay on the coast for a week before heading to Madrid. We had been there a day and a half already. The first day was wonderful, with clear skies and beach time with other tourists. Since our first night in Barcelona, we hadn't been intimate. Peggy seemed a bit grumpy, but tried to act fine when I asked. We walked around town on the morning of our second day, had lunch, and went back to the apartment. She seemed restless, but asked me to cuddle in bed with her for a nap. I was happy too. I dozed off a bit, but I don't think she did. We didn't say much. I started to cherish these last moments together before we parted ways. Around 3 o'clock, someone knocked on the door. Our apartment was on the top floor of a 2-story building. To get to our door, you needed a 4-digit code for the lockdown stairs. Whoever it was, they had to be a neighbor. Peggy looked at me with a small smile, probably because I had to get out of bed and she didn't. So I got up and opened the door. Still a bit sleepy, I didn't use the peephole first. I opened the door and saw Joanna and Alexandra, the 2 attractive blonde girls from the London hotel reception, standing there with big smiles. I quickly shut the door. In that brief moment, I decided I had either gone crazy or was drugged. "What are you doing?" Peggy shouted as she ran to the door, pushed me aside, let the girls in, and started hugging and greeting them. "Nice welcome," Joanna said to me with her hands on her hips. I said nothing. I just touched her shoulder with my finger. She seemed real. "Just checking I'm not dreaming," I said. Joanna frowned for a moment, then understood. "She didn't tell you?" "Nope." "Oh, you poor thing," she said, pouting, and pulled me close. I thought it was for a hug, but she kissed me. I didn't do a good job of stopping her. Alexandra pulled us apart. "My turn." "Hello, Mr. Pinky," she said, replacing Joanna and kissing me. Peggy then pulled me away and directed me to the sofa. I hadn't noticed she had gotten out a bottle of Spanish brandy and 4 glasses. The girls sat beside me, one on each side. Peggy filled the glasses and gave each girl 2 before sitting on my lap facing me. She took a glass from each girl and handed one to me and one for herself. "Cheers," she toasted. We repeated the toast and clinked glasses. Peggy looked me straight in the eyes. "Surprise," she said with a smile. "You don't mind if they stay, do you?" I knew intimacy was off the table now with others around, but I decided to be a good sport about it. I frowned. "I don't know. It's the busy season. The rates are high. Can they pay?" They all smiled and started to giggle. "Maybe we can think of something," Alexandra said, wiggling her eyebrows. My brain stopped working at the thought, but I tried to stay composed. Simplified story, my excitement suddenly became noticeable as Peggy moved on top of me in her shorts. "He likes the idea, girls," she said with a smile. "Are you serious?" I asked Peggy. "Maybe." I finished my drink. "Wow," I said. "Now it's medical school and volunteering." "What are you talking about?" Peggy asked. I looked at her, then at the other girls, and then back at Peggy. "Unless I'm crazy, I think I heard you suggest that I could have some fun with these ladies. Is that a problem?" "Yes. Back in London, I decided that the only way to be worthy of either of them was to go to medical school and volunteer for years. Now you're talking both. That's even more volunteering." Joanna and Alexandra laughed as Peggy sat on my lap. "And what did you need to do to be worthy of me?" she asked. "Why you a coffee in a cheap cafe," I said. She began to playfully hit my shoulders. I pulled her close to make her stop as Joanna and Alexandra laughed even more. "Jerk!" "Okay, now I don't feel bad telling you this," Peggy said with a serious look. "They're here for me, not you." That surprised me. "Say that again." Peggy's face turned bright red. "They're here for me," she whispered. "Oh no. Did I make you like girls? One woman left me for another man. Now you're leaving me for two women. What a track record I have." I closed my eyes and put my hands over my face. Peggy tried to calm me down, worried she had hurt me. I opened my eyes and smiled. When she realized I was joking, she tried to hit me again, but I held her wrists. "Just tell me what's happening," I said. Peggy relaxed and looked at me with an open, honest face. "I've always wanted to try it. The girls and I stayed in touch since London. We've talked when you were out. They told me they're in a relationship. I told them I was curious, so we planned this week at the beach so I could try." Joanna leaned into my side, stroked my arm, and whispered in my ear. Alexandra did the same on the other side. "The thing is, Esteban," Joanna said, "she wouldn't do it unless you were there to make her feel safe." When it looked like I might argue, Alexandra whispered into my other ear. "We told Peggy it would be a waste for you to just watch. I thought you girls liked only girls." "What we are," Joanna said, "is interested, and we don't have time to date because we work so much. That made me curious. Then how did you afford this?" "I'm paying," Peggy said proudly. "I've saved money by traveling with you, and they got cheap flights." I didn't say what I thought, which was unkind. Instead, I said, so to summarize, "You're willing to spend some time with me while the three of you spend the week together. Is that it?" "Yes," Peggy said as Joanna and Alexandra nodded. "It only took me a second to decide. I can live with that." And that's what we did. Not right away. The girls liked to take their time. First, we went out to eat and drink, talking and touching, but mostly between them. It was exciting, but I wondered when things would happen. Then, back at the apartment, they wanted showers. More touching and light kissing followed. I was getting impatient, but finally Joanna took a moment to be with me while Alexandra was with Peggy. I didn't last long, but Joanna didn't mind. When Peggy finally enjoyed herself, it was intense. She looked at me, which made me feel good. For the next few days, we had lazy mornings, went to the beach, and they wore tiny bikinis while staying close to each other. I swam and joined them later for lunch. Then they would head back to the apartment. Peggy was so focused on exploring that we didn't run together like we used to. They didn't forget about me, though. I experienced new things like being with two girls at once, then three. I had my first group experience and tried many things. Joanna and Alexandra both liked being with Peggy and each other. I had my moments with each of them, often while watching the others, but I often felt like an extra or like the odd guest who needed attention so he wouldn't feel left out. Peggy clearly didn't need me to keep an eye on her anymore. One day I realized something. I was bored at the party. Don't get me wrong, the physical stuff was fun, even great, but Peggy was right. I needed feelings to fully enjoy it. Peggy was really into the whole scene, and I liked seeing her happy. Joanna and Alexandra were good company too, but that was it. On the plus side, I wasn't worried about going to medical school and then having to go to Somalia to help kids. On the downside, I wanted to leave a few days early and maybe find Veronica even though I was still married. She was on my mind more and more. With all that in my head, I sat at a small coffee shop by the beach one afternoon. The girls were out somewhere. I was thinking about the best way to leave early when I heard a woman's voice ask, "Excuse me, sir, but is this seat taken?" I looked up, surprised to see Veronica standing there. She wore a wide straw hat and big sunglasses, which she had pushed down her nose to look at me. Her light dress showed the outline of her body, and her smile was bright. Many witty comments rushed through my head, but none came out. Instead, I stood up, walked close, and looked into her eyes. She took off her sunglasses and looked up at me, waiting. We kissed. Sitting down, I asked, "How did you find me?" Then I felt unsure about myself. "You were looking for me, right?" She rolled her eyes. "Of course I was. Why do you think I'm here?" "Peggy told me you were here. She used the Find My Phone app. That answered the how. Peggy and I paired our phones a while back to keep track of each other so no one would get lost or hurt. But another question still needed an answer. Why are you here?" Veronica took my hand. "Peggy called and said she was worried about what would happen to you after she went to school. I suggested I visit before school starts. I was supposed to come tomorrow, but she told me the other day to hurry because you didn't look like you were having fun at the party." She paused and then added, "I never thought I'd say a sentence like that. Me neither. Is it true?" I shrugged. "Yeah? Why?" "That was a good question. The physical stuff is nice, but it's nothing more, for me at least. Peggy seems to be having a great time, and that's good for her. But I need to be with someone I really like you. I thought I might be taking a risk by being so honest, especially if she wanted to go more slowly. But then again, she came because I was bored at the party. Maybe I was the one moving too slowly. "You must always tell me lies like that," she said. "I'm not lying," I said with a smile. "You want me to believe that you'd rather be with me instead of 3 girls who want to be with you?" she asked with a smirk. "Yes, that's exactly what I want to hear. Tell me more lies. Okay, game on. You want to know what part of your body I like best? Yes, your smiling face." She looked at me for a moment. "You are very good at this. And I'm not lying," I said as I showed her my phone. "I was trying to find the earliest train to go to Madrid. I have your info open so I can find a hotel or Airbnb nearby." She took my phone and looked. "My face is really your favorite part of my body." "Yes, though there are lots of other nice parts too." She pretended to frown. "I thought you were a gentleman, but I think Peggy was right." "Right about what?" "She said the beach would be a good place for me to see you again because I could wear a tiny bikini to make sure you were really interested." She waited for me to respond. "How tiny a bikini?" She leaned in, locking eyes with me. Probably nothing. That sounded very promising, but I said, "Being a gentleman is overrated, and Peggy really seems to know me well. I think I'd like to see you in this tiny bikini you're talking about. I'd like to show you." We leaned in to kiss, but heard a voice to the side. "Back off from my man." Peggy jumped into my lap and put her arms around me, stopping our kiss. Joanna and Alexandra sat down smiling. Veronica said, "He's mine now, remember? You want him? You have to tag in," Peggy said, holding her hand up. Veronica looked confused, so Peggy explained, "Like in wrestling." "You know?" Veronica smiled as she understood. She looked at me. "Do you want me to?" I smiled. Then I frowned. "I guess that might be okay, but I'm still married." "It's okay, Esteban," Peggy said. "She's doing me a favor. Your bad mood is ruining my party. I told her that high standards are wasted on you." Veronica shrugged. "I might not be lowering them that much," she said as she tapped Peggy's hand, and Peggy got up, kissed me on the cheek, and took a seat. Veronica then sat on my lap. She had to get up when the coffee and snacks arrived, but Veronica stayed close the rest of the time. We walked around town together and later went back to the apartment for drinks before dinner. I could see Peggy was now very relaxed with Joanna and Alexandra. Peggy seemed to be calm and easy. Peggy seemed like she was done trying new things because Joanna and Alexandra were together more often. Peggy just watched Veronica and me with a big smile. That night, Peggy made sure Veronica and I were in one of the spare bedrooms. She was finally playing matchmaker. After Peggy left, Veronica looked at me. "Do you mind being with 1 girl instead of 3? I'm greedy. I don't like to share. Me neither." At night, we thought the best way to get to know each other quickly was for Veronica to model her tiny bikini for me. It was way too revealing. I told her she couldn't wear it in public. She didn't argue. Instead, she made me close my eyes while she changed into a more decent swimsuit that I approved of. I think she liked that I cared so much. While she sat on my lap in her better swimsuit, we kissed each part of each other's bodies that wasn't covered. When we ran out of those spots, we uncovered more. Some parts got more attention than others. After a while, Veronica ran her fingers through my chest hair. When do you think you'll be divorced? My hearing is in late November. According to my lawyer, I don't even have to go. I should be free after that unless she pulls something crazy. Good. As soon as you get that paper, you can meet my parents. I stayed quiet, and she propped up on her elbow to look at me. You're planning to stay, right? I don't know what I am going to do. I admit it. I need to find a job somewhere. If you wanted to stay, we could figure something out, she said. But I need to know if you're staying because of me or because Peggy is here. Her face was serious. Why are you so worried about Peggy? You're the one who told me she had a nice body. You also said she could sleep with me, and she's the one who invited you here. She pressed her lips together. I did that because when I saw you two together, I knew it was going to happen anyway, and I wouldn't be around to stop it. What I want to know is, what are you going to do now? Peggy is an amazing friend, I said. Then I whispered, but there's this other girl I like. Oh, really? What's she like? I pulled her on top of me. Her legs straddled my thighs. She's a beautiful Latina with a lovely smile. I'm skipping a good time with other girls because of her. Maybe I could introduce you. We kissed. I don't think I'd like her. Besides, I asked, how do I know you don't want to try something with the other girls here? She wrinkled her nose. That does not interest me. Good. Seeing you with them would make my head spin. That's how I found myself on a sunny Mediterranean beach with 4 beautiful women. 3 were nearly naked and 1 was slightly more covered. Suddenly I heard a voice call, Steve! I turned around and all 4 girls called out, It's not Steve, it's Esteban! He had been laughed and fell back onto the beach towels. They had been drinking sangria for a while. The woman who called me was the wife of the guy I used to work for. He came right up behind her. They were on vacation, too. They tried to act like they didn't notice I was doing fine and seemed to have a group of women around me. As his wife sat down under a beach umbrella to talk with the girls, I got up to talk to my ex-boss, Fred. I was upset when you quit with so little notice, but after everything happened, I understood why. I'm sorry. There were a lot of things I could have done better. A big smile crossed his face. Did you really fill your house with homeless people? I don't know what you're talking about. He shook his head and laughed softly. Then he got serious and looked like he was thinking about something. He glanced at me as he bit his lip. You know, the company has a Madrid office. He waited. When I didn't say anything, he continued. We liked you and we're sorry to see you go. I made him wait a bit. After all, I had a group of women interested in me. Why did I need to leave? What I mean is, if you wanted to stay here for some reason, and here he pointed to the girls, we could probably get you a job in Madrid. That was enough friendly banter, I thought. It sounds like a great offer, but my Spanish is terrible, and I don't have a work visa. I don't see how I could make it work. And Fred explained that part of the reason he was in Spain, besides vacation, was to deal with some issues at the Madrid office. They needed someone to connect with the American offices. They could pay for language classes and help with the visa. Was I interested in talking to the people at the Madrid office? I looked at Veronica. She didn't notice at first, but then she caught my eye and smiled. I looked back at Fred. He had followed my gaze and grinned at me. There are worse reasons to do something, Fred said. I laughed. There sure were. Yes, Fred, I'd love to talk to the folks in Madrid. I'll call them and tell them to expect you. I'll email you the number. He glanced at Veronica again, then back at me. Sorry about what happened with Lori, but it looks like you're doing well. I hope things go well. It looks like you have many choices no matter what happens. We shook hands as Fred got his wife and continued their walk. I sat down under the umbrella. I might stay in Spain a bit longer. I have a new job offer at my old company. What a strange twist, Peggy said. I shrugged. I called it dumb luck. Veronica gave me a big hug. Then Peggy asked Veronica if she could hug me too. When Veronica said yes, Peggy hugged me. Joanna asked, "What do you do for work?" My old job was to create useful plans for companies to handle big changes. She frowned. I don't get that. What would you do now? The same thing, but in Spanish. I turned to Veronica. You'll help me learn Spanish, right, Ronnie? It was my first time using that nickname for her. She liked it and nodded. Good. I want to learn the bad words first. Right away, Ronnie said some Spanish words. They didn't seem polite, so she did, as I asked. But she said them too fast for me to remember. Peggy just laughed. Fast forward a few weeks to September. She settled into an apartment with a nice Ukrainian girl. She started classes and was having fun. We still met up for dinner or drinks with Ronnie. Peggy and Ronnie became very close. Olga, the Ukrainian, often joined us and was lots of fun, too. The divorce was final in December, just before Christmas. I met Ronnie's family, and they were great people. After getting their approval, Ronnie and I got more serious. During the semester, Peggy and I sometimes met alone if Ronnie was busy studying, but Peggy and I never slept together again. We did fall asleep together a few times. We were always fully clothed, and it happened when we got drunk and passed out in the nearest bed. I always told Ronnie about these times, and she would just laugh. She had decided that Peggy was not a threat. I didn't need to help Peggy find dates. She met guys easily, just as I thought she would. My job was to approve them. She never saw a guy more than once or twice unless I said it was okay. She had many short-term boyfriends. She was having too much fun for me to feel bad for her. By June of the next year, Peggy was back in the States and Ronnie moved into my apartment. 3 years later, and after Ronnie got her medical degree, we got married in Miami at City Hall. The paperwork in Madrid was too complicated. Peggy flew down and insisted on being a witness. My family came too. During our time together, it was clear they liked Peggy but loved Ronnie. "You're doing half good, little brother," my sister said after too much champagne. "Good for baseball, but not for marriages. Don't mess this one up. She's a keeper." 2 years later, Peggy was getting married, so Ronnie and I flew in from Madrid. The groom, who was the old friend of Peggy's ex-boyfriend, lived in my hometown. As Peggy's wingman, my job was to stop anyone who might object during the wedding. I told her I wasn't sure if I could stop them because they might have a good story. During that, Ronnie just shook her head and told Peggy I would do my best to help. Back at the cafe, Peggy brought Ronnie up to date. Malibu Barbie was just telling us she has twins, a son and a daughter who are 4.5. "Really? Congrats!" Ronnie said to Lori and shook her hand. Lori was surprised, but shook it. Ronnie turned to me. "It's too bad. They are too young to babysit," Ronnie said as she rubbed her belly and shrugged. She turned back to Lori. "I'm Veronica, Steve's wife," she said, introducing herself. Ronnie never called me Esteban after Oliva. To her, I was Steve or Steven when she was mad, which was rare. When I tried to argue, she just told me not to be silly. To Ronnie, Peggy became Margarita after Oliva, and Peggy loved it. Only I was allowed to call her Peggy in private. Ronnie continued with Lori. "I've heard a lot about you." She smiled kindly. Peggy not so much. She looked like she was going to say something mean to Lori, but read our moods and let it go. Lori looked defeated. Peggy checked her watch and left. "I'm late. See you two tomorrow at the rehearsal dinner," she said, waving as she left the cafe without looking at Lori. After a moment, Lori looked at me. "Congrats. I didn't know you got married, Steve," she said, and finished her drink. "None of your friends or family talked to me, and you left social media. I wondered if you were still in Norway, but I guess you never went." She fiddled with the napkin on the table. "I always knew we were getting divorced. I may be blonde, but I'm not dumb," she said, looking at me again. "I had talked to a lawyer. He told me there was no way to stop it. He said since you weren't asking for more than the money you already took, it wasn't worth fighting, not even over what you did to the house. I ripped up those papers because I knew I messed up and didn't know how to fix it. I hoped you'd see I didn't want a divorce and talk to me. I was angry, scared, and confused. I got even more scared when I found out I was pregnant. That's when I realized I needed you. But I knew you weren't coming back. I thought I could use the kids to get you to talk to me until you learned they weren't yours. Maybe that would give me a chance to see you again. I missed you. The guys I've dated since only cared about my looks, my money, or the fact that I'm on TV. They didn't care about me as a person like you did." She had tears in her eyes as she stood up. "Good luck with the baby," she said to Ronnie before leaving quickly. Ronnie and I sat silently for a few moments. "She does have a nice body," Ronnie said. I stayed quiet, but she continued. "How do you think it compares to mine?" I hugged her tightly, holding her hands under her big belly. "Your body made me want to have a baby with you. And remember, I left a party full of beautiful women for you. I promise I won't let you wear that revealing bikini in public." Ronnie relaxed and smiled. She was quiet for a bit. €30, she finally said. I was enjoying holding her and wasn't paying attention. You owe me €30. Pay up. How did you come up with that, love? I asked. Ronnie counted on her fingers. She came to meet you today when you said she probably wouldn't. She didn't know you were married. She really thought you went to Norway. She knew you were getting divorced no matter what. She wanted you to think the kids were yours and she wanted to get back with you. That's 6 things I got right. €5 each. That's €30 total. €25. Lloyd is the father, not to Sean. I get €5 credit. She turned in my lap to look at me. Really? The fat cameraman? I thought you were joking. Yes, but I also happen to be right. That's 1 point for me. Wow, he's ugly. She is, really? How does your sister say it? Oh, yes. Dumb as a sack of hammers. Okay, you can pay me later. Now buy me French fries. Your child is making me hungry. She rubbed her belly and said, Wait a few minutes in there. I did as my love asked and signaled the waiter to order French fries. That was when I realized Lori hadn't paid for her $20 drink, even though she still made much more money than I did. Looking back, I knew I didn't regret inviting the homeless people to live with us all those years ago.